So my name is Wendy Cole, and I'm the Manager of Sustainability for the R&A in St Andrews. I've been with the R&A now over 12 years, so I've served my time, and I enjoy coming out to talk to people about what we're working on. And I'm here to talk to you today about Golf Course 2030. So the R&A, we're very focused on sustainability and have a section dedicated to it on our website. So if you want to know more about what we're doing in the world of sustainability, and most particularly for Golf Course 2030, then please have a look at our website, www.randa.org. So what have we been doing this year? Obviously, the Open. It's our biggest event. It's our biggest flagship. It's where we demonstrate what we do best. This year's Open was, for the first time in a long, long time, 60 more years, was held in Northern Ireland at Royal Portrush. And we launched a very special sustainability measure whilst at Royal Portrush, and that was our Open Water Initiative, where we eliminated single-use plastic water bottles across the tournament. Now that's massive for us because in previous years we had distributed over 100,000 bottles during the week. So to eliminate them totally was quite a challenge. We did this by providing water stations from Blue Water, and they provided on-site water stations where members of the public, spectators, players could access clean, filtered and chilled water. We encouraged all our spectators to bring their own bottle to the tournament before they arrived. But we also gave away 5,000, I think it was, stainless steel refillable bottles to the first 1,000 on each day. We gave those away free and we sold them in the shop. They were a great souvenir because they were branded with the Open logo. But for what it did for us and what it did for the players, we just cannot measure the impact that taking out all those single-use plastic bottles had. Rules modernisation, you'll be aware that we brought in new rules in 2019, in January, to simplify the game. We are still working on our Distance Insights project, and the results of that project will be published in February 2020. We've worked on that in conjunction with the USGA, so that's all brand new research. Our Women's Golf Charter, getting more women and girls into golf, but not merely playing golf. We want women in the industry. We want people like me standing up in front of you. And it's very nice to be here because for most of these conferences we attend, the audience is generally male. So it's really nice to see so many female faces in the audience today. Golf and health is a big thing for us. We see your poster over here. We're very keen to prove the benefits, both physical and mental, of playing golf. And there's more information about that on our website too. And on course, we support GEO Foundation in their programme on course to get golf courses to understand the benefits of recording everything you do on the course and in your clubhouse. And greenkeeper education. This is a particular favourite of mine. It's my responsibility. The R&A spend £175,000 each year on greenkeeper education. So we're very keen for people to understand the key role that greenkeepers play, and most especially when we're talking about the challenges of Golf Course 2030. So that brings me to 2030. So hopefully today you're going to hear some things that are of interest and that could maybe raise some questions for you, and some things that hopefully just make you think about how relevant this could be in Finland. So what is Golf Course 2030? Well, it's an industry roadmap. So it's involving all areas of the industry, of the golf industry. And it's looking at the scenarios of climate change, resource restrictions, and pesticide or water regulations. And the reason for doing that is to ensure optimum playing quality, course condition and playing quality. So why course condition and playing quality? Well, in every survey that's been done to date, it's what everyone feels is the most important thing about playing golf. The quality of the course you're playing on and how good your game is at the end of the day. Now that can only be done to a certain extent, but what we can do about the course is what's in our hands. So why 2030? We've tied it to the UN Sustainable Development Goals, and 2030 seemed as good a date as any to look towards the future. It's a little way in the future, but it's not too far that we can't imagine it happening. We can see as far as 2030, and we can make changes that we can implement before 2030. A map showed you the climate change weather patterns across the world, and they are changing. For what reason? That's debatable, and jury's out as to what makes climate change, but it certainly is changing. You'll see on this map areas in red or towards the darker colours are suffering greatly from dry weather, from lack of rain. But we all have our own issues, whether that's too much water or too little. So, my question to you, how are you being impacted by climate change? Anyone want to shout out what might happen in Finland? Why climate change could be important in Finland? No one ever says anything when I ask. Oh, great.
Well, drought season might get longer, which is good.
Yeah.
It'll probably get more rain, which is bad.
I know. There's always both sides a balance. But yeah, you know, if we can mitigate, if we can think about how we can deal with the changing patterns, maybe we could increase the season. Maybe we could take measures to cope with too much water, not enough water. So resources. When we ask people, what resource restrictions do you have? The answer that comes back most often is water. And as I said, it doesn't have to be too little water, it can be too much. We suffer from a lot of water in Scotland. It's very wet, very grey. But here you see the world map, where everyone has challenges, but the challenges differ where you are in the world. But resources isn't just water. There are other challenges we face. Labour shortages. How do we get more people into golf, into greenkeeping? How do we encourage school children to leave school and see golf and greenkeeping as a career? It's a challenge for all of us. As I said, we do a lot of work with greenkeeper education, but we still struggle to get school children to understand that there is a whole career in golf. It may start in greenkeeping, but it may end up wherever. It may end up PGA, it may end up agronomy, it may end up club management. It may end up being a part of a federation. It's all the golf industry, and we need to get together and prove that you can have a very successful career in the golf industry. So resources for labour are a major issue. Also, resources such as sand, aggregates. We have evidence in the UK, I don't know why that's gone off. Oh, it's come back on. We have evidence in the UK to say that our quarries that we use for our sand and our aggregates will run out in 30 years' time. What happens when they run out? If we do nothing in the meantime, we're all going to be looking around thinking, what do we do now? So we need to plan for that. We need to have measures in place. We need to have alternatives. And we need to start thinking about that now, not in 20 years from now. I'm going to ask you another question. Go on, someone else put their hand up. What resource issues might you have in Finland? Are they different to ours? Are they the same? Anyone? I'm sure there are similarities. You may not have the same issues we have, but I'm sure there are similarities. And I'm hoping that by looking at Golf Course 2030, you can make it relevant to your clubs. Regulations. We are suffering in the UK, not maybe as much as in Scandinavia or in other countries, with pesticide regulations, with chemicals being taken off the market every week. Another one's gone. How do we deal with disease? How do we deal with pests if we don't have those things that we've relied on for so many years? We need to think of alternatives. We need to think of alternative ways of managing our courses that don't involve using pesticides, that go back to traditional ways where we didn't have the pesticides available to us. And similarly, water restrictions. In some countries in Europe, they have huge restrictions on how much water they can use, where they can use it, how often they can use it, what source it comes from. There are less and less courses allowed to use mains water. So we need to think about the quality of our water. Where are we going to get it from? How good is it going to be for our grass? Is the grass going to survive with recycled water? We need to adapt. We need to change. We need to look at grass species that are drought tolerant. All of these things will come because of regulations, because we will be forced to change our ways. Another question. Third time lucky. Someone give me a question or an answer. What regulations do you have that are impacting you in Finland? Is there anything that comes to mind instantly where you are forced because of regulation to change your practices? No? Maybe have a think about it and ask me later. Pesticides. This is the Swedish, or Scandinavian, I should say, result of how they dealt with pesticide regulation. They worked with their government. They spoke to lots of other people. They made a team together and they called it the Green Deal. And that allowed them to put their case as to why they should use what they needed to in limited quantities on the golf course. So they got a temporary exemption. If you work together with government, you can not necessarily change, but you can give them your point of view. You can explain what the regulations mean, what those restrictions will mean. Similarly, in France, the French Golf Federation signed an agreement with their government, and they signed it with regard to biodiversity, water, and pesticides. Similar restrictions, and they worked together to get around them, to make sure that their courses were still looked after. So what scenarios are we looking at in Golf Course 2030? Well, we have 3 scenarios. We have business as usual. Nothing changes. Everything just goes on. But then we would ask, will we still have golf courses in 2030 if we do nothing? And then, what if restrictions come in for water and pesticides, and we have 50% less than what we have now? What would we do? And then what happens in the worst case? We see courses closed because they're not sustainable and they cannot survive in this new world where everything is restricted. Nobody wants course closures. No one wants to get to that situation. So it's up to us between now and the future, where the restrictions are coming in, to actually put measures in place to ensure that this doesn't happen to our particular course. So, the process, the Golf Course 2030 process. With those 3 scenarios, with those 3 reasons, climate, resources, regulations, we sit down and we get together with industry and we form a stakeholder group and we find out what everyone's opinion is and what they see as the main issues facing us for the future. I'm just going to move closer to the screen so I can actually see it. We then undertake a gap analysis. Look at the process, look at the strategies we need in place to move on. And then we formulate action plans to address these issues. What research do we need? What information do we need to be able to address these issues? And then as we go through, we implement those plans. And then I would say that item 6 on that little flowchart is the most important. We need to communicate. We need to educate. We need to educate our clubs. We need to educate our committees. We need to educate our golfers. But we also need to educate the outside world, those who aren't involved in the golf industry and arguably don't really understand the pressures that you're all under. We would then look to report on what progress had been made and decide whether the first 6 steps take about 2-3 years. Have we made progress? Is there more work needs to be done? Have we addressed the issues, or do we need to commission more research? So we would set off onto another round. So Golf Course 2030, we did a pilot launch in the UK. GB&I, we call it, Great Britain and Ireland. These were the stakeholders we brought together. And as you can see, there are the obvious people like the R&A and our federations, England Golf, Scottish Golf, etc. But we also brought together people that you may not think of as obvious. So the Crop Protection Association, more associated with agriculture than golf, but they have something to add to our scenarios. We brought together education establishments, because if we want to undertake research and we want that research to be credible, we need credible organisations to do it. So we brought in universities. We're going to commission PhDs so that we get the very latest information out to the industry. And what were the priority issues for the UK? How do we make it relevant? How do we appeal to the key audiences? How do we communicate that? Course condition and playability. As I said, in every survey that's been done, that comes to the top of the list for everyone. So we're looking at putting services, we're looking at measurements, we're looking at education, we're looking at standards. We talked about resources. Don't know why I keep going off. There we go. We talked about resources. We talked about chemicals. Are there alternatives out there? Are there plant protection products that are not chemical, that are not restricted? What about labour? Not just getting people into the industry, but actually keeping them there, retaining staff is a big, big problem. We need to look at everything to do with that. We need to look at course condition, obviously, but we need to look at their conditions of work, how respected they are, how well paid they are. We need to keep them within our industry. Sand and aggregates, I did tell you about the UK. I don't know whether that's worldwide. That's what we need to find out. In your particular area, is there an issue? Do we need to look at alternatives? In the UK, particularly with the R&A, our Open Championship is held on links courses. So that's courses right next to the sea. So they typically have white bunker sand. How long are we going to be able to access white bunker sand? Are we just going to go for a lesser sand? Are we going to look for an alternative? Are we going to look for glass? What are the alternatives out there? We believe this research needs to be done to find out how we can survive. And water. Wherever we've gone and whichever country we've talked to, water always comes up as an issue. It is a limited resource, but sometimes we're dealing with too much and sometimes we're dealing with too little. We have to deal with that on a country-by-country basis. And coastal change. I did tell you about our Open Championships all being on coastal golf courses. In the UK, we're a small island. We're used to bad weather, but it is eroding our coastline. And we have courses in danger of being claimed by the sea. We have courses that are having to change their layouts because they're too close to the cliff edge and the cliff edge is crumbling away. So that's a big issue for our courses. We spoke to the Royal Spanish Golf Federation and we introduced them to the Golf Course 2030 concept. And we asked them to look very similar to what we're doing today. What are your issues? Where do you see the problems? And these are the 4 things they came up with. Not surprisingly, water being the most important. We also spoke to STIRF in Scandinavia, and we asked them what was in their research agenda. What were they looking for the future? What were they looking into? Integrated pest management, a big area of research for STIRF. Sustainable water management, so exactly that, too much or too little. It has to be sustainable. Winter stress management, not a problem we really have in the UK, because if we do get snow, it doesn't last very long and we don't get any stress on the coast because of it. But clearly it is an issue in Scandinavia and it is probably an issue in Finland. And multifunctional use of golf courses. We need to understand that life is changing and people don't have the time they had to play 18 holes of golf. But rather than that golf course closed down, what about looking at other things you could do on the course? What about opening it up to other things? Now, I was speaking to Hannah yesterday evening from the Finnish Golf Union, and she was telling me about your speed golf. Not something that's been introduced in the UK, but it sounds fantastic. It's an alternative. It's a different way of looking at a golf course, and that's what we need to do. Communication is key in everything we do. It's the reason I'm standing here in front of you today. If we don't communicate, if we don't educate, if we don't get our message out there, then nothing will happen. And we will end up with that third scenario of courses closing. So communication is key to what we do. We're working very closely with GEO Foundation to get that message out there across the world. And I'm here to tell you that Golf Course 2030 opens doors for you. If you have your own Golf Course 2030 strategy, you are then available, you have access to funds. Funds for research, education. You can dictate your own programs. What do you need research for in your country? It will be different to what we have in the UK. But we can provide funds to get that education and to get that research done on behalf of you. And we also have a Golf Sustainability Fund. And that's for capital projects aimed at projects that have innovation, something future-proof, something to look forward, somewhere where we can capitalise on what we've got, better it or maintain it. So that's also funding that's available to you. Getting there. So what about how we go forward? What do we do from this point forward? Well, as I said, we launched Golf Course 2030 in 2018 in GB&I. So we need to learn from that process. We need to see where we could improve, see where we could make changes. And we need to engage with different countries. So I've told you we've already engaged with Spain and with Scandinavia. In October, we had a meeting with European affiliates where we discussed their countries and how we could engage with them. And as a result of that, what will probably happen is rather than have individual country Golf Course 2030s, we will have regional Golf Course 2030s. So Northern Europe, Central Europe, Southern Europe being our examples. I spoke to Hannah last night and suggested you get in touch with Sturf from Finland. Go to Sturf, see what they're doing, see if you can learn from them, see if you can join them and make a group Golf Course 2030. So, what projects do we have in the pipeline for 2020? Well, playing quality standards, setting those standards, and then how we measure them, how we adhere to those standards so that we have some level of consistency and sustainability throughout. So we're talking tees, fairways, aprons. Water management. Everyone needs to be aware of water management. As I said, whether it comes from the main supply or a borehole or recycled water on site or lakes, we need to look at our water management. Innovations in integrated turf management, very important. We need to understand turf more closely so that we can manage it cleverly. Aggregates again for construction, for bunkering, but for changing courses. If we're looking at coastal change and we're looking at moving holes because of landslips, we need to think about the availability of aggregates to do that construction work. Coastal management. The profile of the course manager. My role in promoting greenkeeper education is to prove that we need to start at the very bottom and we need to raise the profile of everyone involved in golf course management, from the greenkeeper right up to the club manager, They all need to understand each other's roles and understand the importance they have within the club. And of course, what I'm talking to you today for, Golf Course 2030 and education. Education is key. If we don't get out there and talk about it, then it'll just be something nice that the RNA once did. We need to get out there. We need to tell everyone about it. We need to ask questions, and we need to learn from you. You're not even going to answer this, are you? Have a think about it. What would your priorities be? At your course, at your club, what would be your Golf Course 2030 priorities? If you look at those scenarios and you think about climate change, about resources, about pesticide regulations, what would your priority be? What would be the first thing on your list that you would feel you need to address? Would it be water? Would it be too much water? Would it be a longer playing season? Or would it be stress management, winter stress management? Only you know that.